We're getting into our first draft of the day. Weibo versus Ultra Prime. Every game's in Group D today, and all the games are really important. It's close there. Across the entirety of the group, Draft 1 starts.
Couple key bans to note here. It is one of those pocket pick bangs against Xingtian. Of course, he is a big Darius player, likes to play it in a lot of spaces. Has occasionally got him a little burned, all puns towards a Rumble matchup intended.
From Breathe,
Indeed.
by the way.
Yes, exactly. On the other side, the Rumble away from Breathe alongside the Tristana makes a lot of sense to me. Two really big picks for the solo laners respectively.
So, we're seeing the Tristana taken away, which means that we still have the Corki, the Yone, and the Jace if you want AD mid laners. Those have tended to be the AD mid laners that have come through. And with the Yone being banned by Weibo, I wonder if they saw that Ultra Prime were maybe going towards a Corki ban. Xiaohu did actually play a Yone game in one of the recent series, but we're seeing a lot of these AD mid laners being taken off the table. Both of these junglers have looked more comfortable on the AP junglers, so I'm looking to see now what AD mids come through to support that.
Also remind people that Tarzan was arguably the best Maokai in the world for a little bit last year. Some of those games he was doing LNG on the Maokai were absolutely foul, so maybe once he goes back towards that. AP Maokai, man, Tarzan was making that smack last year.
So Tarzan did play in a single Maokai game. He got MVP for it in that game so far, but it looked a little bit shaky. So it's like, it's a bit up and down again. Weibo, do you really trust these things?
True.
How much do you trust them at all? You can normally trust the bot lane. I think particularly Light has been the one stable member for Weibo across all iterations. And having an Ashe in their lane as AD carry or support can help with that.
And Crisp is also an excellent Ashe player, especially considering he was struggling a little bit at points in Split 1 to find his consistency, but the Ashe was always pretty good for him. Yukai, debating a LeBlanc has kind of started to return to meta a little bit of late.
It's very much been a meta since the start of LPL. So I would go even beyond that and say this has been banned a lot, it's been first picked a lot. The best mid laners in the LPL use LeBlanc as a lane bully, go into a 1-3-1, and it kind of spreads out the map in that way. Xiaohu's a big player of it, so it's a takeaway. Wouldn't surprise me now just to see Xiaohu go back towards the Talia on the other side and just try and match some push and have a global in hand. But this does mean that he's probably going back towards an AD skirmishing jungler, Lee Sin, Xin Zhao. I don't know if that's going to be great for Ultra Prime.
Speaking of other champions that have begun to rise in popularity, there's been a couple very good Ezreal performances over the last few days. Shout out to Pays and Kazi. Doggo looking to try and match that further. He has played a bit of Ezreal this split. Of course, he's historically a big Ezreal player, so again, shouldn't surprise you. Also means you can lock in a support that can go roaming around and leave the Ezreal alone.
And again, Xiaohu probably not got many lane bullies or the AD mid laners left on the table right now. So going back to a mage of some kind, I would be very surprised if it was Azir over the Talia. It is. It's against two very mobile targets in the Ezreal and the LeBlanc. I don't know if I love that. I think that Xiaohu's looked a lot more comfortable on that Talia. Unless they want to save that for a later draft or something like that. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the best pick into the LeBlanc for me. I think the LeBlanc runs this lane.
Few interesting hovers there, and I think I tend to agree, especially because Yukai is one of those players that has largely been just better from ahead. Skarner hovered there, and I'm aware that has gotten through these first rotation of picks and bans kind of freely, which is a bit of an unusual change in the drafting priority.
And Breathe has been really good at that pick too, so there was the strong chance of that being locked in, especially with the Darius off the table, one of those anti-tank champions on the other side. Now that Nidalee needs those winning lanes, wants to be pushing into the enemy jungle. I think that, actually Azir can get some good early push. Ashe, of course, obviously gets a lot of control on bot side, so that, and there are a lot of answers towards the Skarner too. I wonder now if Tarzan is going to have a good entrance into the enemy jungle and just saying, look, I'm going to have 3 pushing lanes, especially if they can counterpick the Skarner with something like a Mordekaiser or a Twisted Fate, which of course Breathe is fantastic at both of those, can potentially just counter that Skarner.
So do a bit of a throwback. Tarzan, back when he was debuting on that now legendary Griffin roster, he was a huge player of things like the Nidalee when he could make it work. He and Canyon were kind of those two junglers that came up at similar eras and were doing despicable things with champions like that. Peanut just before them, so the meta's back towards that. We'll see whether Tarzan can deliver. Second phase of bans, though. You called out the Skarner getting through and potentially there being some answers to it at least, but it is in. They're trying to ban away some of those now lane bully options. Things like the Renekton, of course, breed is good with.
We have seen the Renekton played into the Skarner, and it's fine. And it does give early control, but I'm just like, it does get much harder to play that champion later on. Even though, look, I get it. There would have been combos like this.
Nidalee.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There are some combos there. So anyway, now Weibo is saying, okay, we don't want you to have something. Probably the Viego is going to be taken off too, if I were to hazard a guess. But the Lee Sin, the Viego, stuff that can actually escape the Nidalee if they jump at them, or actually skirmish with them at level 3, level 4 as well, could potentially be taken off. In terms of AP junglers, I mean, there's still the Zyra left if you want to go double AP mid jungle for Hacker, of course. We saw, no, it wasn't a Hacker, it was Meteor that did the 20-minute Baron rush. But there is one last AP jungler if we want to go directly towards them, but it would have to be with the AD mid laner. So maybe you're seeing like Xin Sao, Viego with the outside chance of something like an AP jungler instead.
Yeah, I think those make some sense. See what the final ban is here, whether it is going to be the Viego you called. I think Xin Sao, as you mentioned, would be the other option. They get rid of the slightly earlier power spike. That probably forces a Viego if they want the AD option, but there are a couple other calls, as you said, things like the Zyra if they want the AP. I suppose things like Sejuani, but it's miserable into Nidalee, and I'm not sure I would like that.
Right now, I'm wondering whether Ultra Prime are going to give blind pick towards Niket, or you just want to lock in something. Not
again.
Not again. Don't you hop with that. Folks, for the record. Okay, that's very different. For the record, folks, we saw a Rammus Yui from Ultra Prime last split, and God, it wasn't good, folks. So they still hover it every now and again, and it sends shivers down our spines. The Kha'Zix coming through. Kha'Zix, very, very good at dueling, at isolating picks across the board. The problem is, Ultra Prime have a really all-about-the-place kind of team fight. Weibo's team fight is much better in this draft. This team fight is so easy to play.
Oh, God,
lock in the Cassante, lock in the Nautilus. They are just very easy to play around and just say, look, we'll stand in front of our carriers, we'll look for a hook. And on the other side of the front, they need to get a lot more crafty about how they approach fights. Their 1-3-1's probably pretty good, but I'm getting quite worried for their composition. It looks very hard to play.
Ultra Prime are going to need to really index into skirmishes and playing the map wider. And in fairness, they've got excellent pick and skirmish. If anyone ever ends up isolated, you can certainly blow them up between the Kha'Zix and the Blanc pairing up with the CC from other members. But on the other side, you called it out, the team fight is so much easier. And it's very hard to miss a Javelin toss when someone's hit by an Ice Arrow.
Yeah, that's the logic. Now, Niket, with that in mind, it says, look, Niket has been the best, looking the best on engaged supports. Has looked really good on Alistar, Leona, Nautilus, Rel, that kind of class of champion. This gives you some team fight engage. You can't just completely cut out your team fights and say, well, better luck next game, and we'll just try 1-3-1 for this one. But does kind of feel like it's going to be Niket versus the world when it comes to those engages. Not an easy game for him on the Rel.
Yeah, I suppose if you can layer up the CC between the Rel into the Skarner and then Kha'Zix getting to press R and Q a couple times to force the isolation, then maybe you've got some options. Obviously, the skirmishes themselves, pretty good, but you called it out there. I think you're right. It's easier to execute for Weibo, especially if it just comes down towards 5v5s, which a lot of games do if things don't snowball heavily one way or the other.
So, we'll be getting onto the Rift sooner rather than later, and we'll see how those gyros are sounding today. Of course, folks, if you're enjoying yourselves, let us know in chat. Let us know what the audio is sounding like too, because we're kind of just winging it a little bit, and we're very much enjoying seeing what will be flying away on those wings with Weibo and Ultra Prime. These two teams, really important stakes in this matchup. Not gonna lie, I feel like Weibo walk away with a lot more easy to play, confident draft from them. But Ultra Prime, you understand that they can tear apart the map in a 1-3-1 and early skirmishes, but it will be hard to play.
They've gone towards something with a little bit more personal flair. Can they get the Kha'Zix rolling, the LeBlanc rolling, force some of those 1-3-1s and 1v1s? That may be something they can really force that little bit harder. On the other side, you mentioned it, Weibo. An inconsistent team, but looking to really stabilize their form. They've got a stable draft. To the Rift we go. We hear the cries of the crowds. Relatively evenly matched traders there, a little bit more for Weibo, but understandably when you see some of the historical players in there, the likes of Xiao, who of course, long-time veterans and big superstars really of the LPL, for all the level of play, hasn't been perhaps what has been expected of a player of Xiaohu's caliber. The form hopefully is temporary, but the class, as ever, should be permanent.
There's something to that. Right. Talking about some of that permanence, one thing which is permanent is Golden Pocket in a lot of these games, but it's not necessarily combat stats from the side of Ultra Prime. They have themselves 2 first strikes on the Kazakhs and on the LeBlanc. Need to see how they will use them to get early gold in Pocket. Yukai, need to see him have a good game. I think if the LeBlanc gets ahead, I think they can break up in the game, but it is really hard to see what's going to happen in this kind of composition. I do think that Ultra Prime need to get themselves onto the board early and get themselves snowballing. Xiaohu, on the other side of the rift, is now the 2nd most tenured LPL player of all time.
Wow.
Has been for a little while, actually, but 900 LPL games for Xiaohu on the other side of that rift. We did say Yukai needs to have a good game. Xiaohu, despite his recent drop in form, is standing in his way.
4 of those top 5 are still playing, of course, but one I hadn't recognized was the fact that Crisp is number 6 on that list.
Yeah.
So somehow he still seems like a relatively new player to me. Of course, was part of that FPX World winning roster. 2019 was that was relatively recent. 5 years ago now, guys. Don't want to think about that.
Oh man, you know and you've made me think about it all the same.
Oh, it's my fault. I'm sorry. We're getting old here, guys.
So we're seeing junglers on opposite jungle paths. So we've got bottom to top from Hack, and we've got top to bottom from Tarzan. They're going to be clearing at a similar rate on first clear, second clear on, which is really where the Nidalee starts to go into overdrive. But need to track how Tarzan is going to start influencing these early objectives. Yukai, good chunk in this early lane. Did say that, LeBlanc can be a lane bully, has been banned away a lot, and the Azir is not necessarily the best answer in it. LCK's been liking it, LPL's not really picked it up.
I think it's also which players have been liking it. The likes of Faker and Chovy have been crushing heads, but they're 2 of arguably the greatest players of Azir of all time, bar none, really. Not that Xiaohu is exactly a slouch on the champion, but, it is some rarefied company you're in if you're wanting to really prove how good Azir is.
Something like that. It's been really weird talking about Azir between LPL and LCK, because around last year, then going into Worlds, then going into Spring, felt like the Azir and Orianna Pro kind of shifted between the 2 regions. Like, Orianna was so broken in LCK, but it was so crap in LPL. But Azir was so good in China, but really bad in Korea. It was a weird thing. Trump got a contest over the early scuttle. Hacker's not going to see this. The spear lands.
He doesn't have smite, so he's going to lose that. Hacker gets jumped on. Of course, the isolation is there, but the spear landing means that Hacker, initially in a dangerous position, but now gets to leap on forward. Big taste that fear afterwards. But still, Tarzan uses the smite, secures the scuttle crab, and Hacker doesn't really have much to say. He's actually going to be spotted by the vision.
Well, you can see right now, Hacker was trying to recall, maybe to get towards bottom scuttle. We did say that seeing how many camps Tarzan could take away could be really important. You can see that bot lane prio is about even right now. Tarzan should be able to get towards bot scuttle before Hacker can. He's going to go back to base now. Because he was interrupted on his recall, he won't be able to go and contest bot scuttle, and that does mean that Tarzan's going to get the double scuttle, get ahead of the game.
And you can see Crisp and Light immediately trying to push the bot wave as well to ensure they're going to have control here. They immediately roam towards the river. Mid lane though, Yukai, decent chunk there, so there is that, but still not going to stop the scuttle fake, I think. Nice play from Weibo off the reset. You can see Yukai is actually walking down here to see whether something could be spotted. Oh, it's a clone walking down there to see whether things could be spotted.
And also just like, the entire team knows that Scuttle is gone at that point, so you just go towards your lane instead. I really appreciate, once again, Niket having some really good laning traits. I think this guy has had a really good understanding of what his AD carry needs from him in terms of right there, knows the hook's coming, gets a really good trade back. I think that Niket has had really good skirmishing and mechanical instincts. It's quite hard to twin that up to your game sense as a support. A lot of the time, your game sense is the thing which levels up the most between Tier 2 and Tier 1. It really feels like Niket's done well on that level. For me, he has been the best new support we've seen in quite a while.
And I'm really happy about that, because obviously he and Jachi, who were down in the LDL, were 2 of the very best players in the LDL in general. So exciting to watch, but they were the Samira Rel connoisseurs. There were a few of those down in LDL, but they were some of the better ones of it. And part of why it became so meta is, yes, Samira is very much one of those champions, a bit like the Lee Sins for jungle, which is just played by every AD carry in the world in China, it feels like. But part of the reason that works is in Fearless, once you get round to those best of threes, or those game threes of best of threes, rather, to clarify.
Which we have near now, we do have that.
Exactly, you do get towards the space where some of those answers into champions like a Neela or a Samira are a lot harder to come by, and then Niket and Jachi would lock in a Samira, lock in a Rel for Niket, and just Goomba Stomp a lane.
So important thing which is happening now, both of the early game objectives are spawning. We've got first Grubs and first Dragon. We've got Tarzan on the bot side with not as much control as he would like, but we're getting very quickly seeing Qingtian and Hacker contest for these. We could potentially see Hacker going for the Grub take, and because Ultra Prime's bot lane are on good HP and they could potentially contest, we could see a trade of these objectives. Breed's actually coming down to see if he can stop the last take here. If you can get a good chunk onto Hacker, bit dangerous. Bit dangerous when it's like isolated too, even when you are Cassante and do Cassante things. We might see a contest between the two early objectives. Normally you see one traded for the other. Right now Weibo haven't taken that early Dragon though.
Always a reminder, Kha'Zix is one of the very best champions at bringing down objectives. Just your ability to auto-queue auto does a lot of work to just farm your way through those neutral objectives.
A lot of what's happening right now is actually off of Doggo and Niket having good bot lane control. Hacker knows that his bot lane can move. They're resetting that. He needs to be careful. He hits level 6 off of this camp. Tarzan should also know that, but if Hacker and Tarzan both take these next camps, we'll have level 6 for the Dragons. Obviously a bigger spike for the Kha'Zix than it is for the Nidalee, but still important to them both.
Nice hop back there from Yukai, who was a little bit afraid of potentially the shuffle coming on through for the damage and the chunk before what could be that contest. But it looks like actually Weibo have decided, look, everyone's here. We don't want to take the fight as it stands. Everyone's going to just back away.
I've been talking a lot about how basically Top Esports are the only team in LPL right now that are contesting both early objectives. Weibo are not contesting either of these early objectives, and that's not great. You know, you have the Nidalee. Now, you do have a really good team fighting comp compared to Ultra Prime later into the game, but it feels like, really, Ultra Prime got a really solid early game, kind of out of nowhere.
A little bit. I think the most we saw was Tarzan taking away that Scuttle Crab at level 4. That was kind of it. And then Hacker gets the reset, get both sets of early neutrals, and feel pretty good about it. That's a great move for the Kha'Zix. That's good for the control of the bot lane from Doggo and Niket, as you called out as well. And Ultra Prime, we're not at the team fights yet, of course, but the early laning phase, this is good news.
Ooh, Yukai might get a double sigil trade here. Really strong use of that Mimic too. Yukai, of course, with the first strike as well, you're taking some of that damage and turning it into gold. Yukai versus Xiaohu, not really blown open, but it has felt like Yukai's had the control in the early game that they've needed. Now, this is stage 1. Ultra Prime needed this. Weibo, they're happy with this for now, just about. They cannot let Ultra Prime run away with the gold lead, because if Weibo do get to those first team fights on an even keel, I think their comp is so much better for it. So just watch for Weibo and how they can force that big first fight of the game. They should be better when things grouped up with around the Ash Arrow engage as well.
I think also you then got to keep your eyes on people like Hacker, right? Because of course, with the lethality build, you often do Umbral Glaive into Edge of Night, and an Edge of Night that comes on through will be so valuable this game to keep threat onto people like Light, who can't just immediately arrow you to stop you jumping on them.
Yukai jumping forward again over the wave. I really like LeBlanc combos, Sam. I like them a lot.
They are really
cool. In terms of like doing, one of my favorite ones, it's a really consistent one, is where you mimic on the distort to open up. You don't use it for damage, but then it just gives you a guaranteed QW afterwards. It's just really nice ones. You can like do a double bunny hop, but you get your guaranteed combo at the end of it, which is really nice. And he's been doing well right now. See that Xiaohu's trying to use save his Q for when LeBlanc jumps in, reposition it so you get the Q damage and then auto afterwards. Azir's less bursty than he used to be though, because he's much more about W maxing rather than Q maxing now, which means that he doesn't get the poke from the immediate Q hit. It means he actually needs to get 2-3 autos to even up those trades, and Yukai's never stood in one place for long enough for those soldiers to get that uptime.
Whereas in a shock to everyone, LeBlanc is about, hear this guys, burst trades.
Yeah, wow. Well, it's kind of poke if you want to view it like that.
True enough, but you see what I mean.
Qingtian didn't take aggro though. I was like, what's he doing? I was wondering what he was walking up for, because he didn't have Demolish, I'm pretty sure. I was like, okay, Qingtian, whatever.
He's making a statement. Sending a message.
What's the statement? Is it what kind of message is it? What would
I am here to repossess your tower.
What? No.
Your crockery is mine.
No. What's the
plates?
Plates, right? Los Platos. Oh, that's a really good chain after. Xiaohu's been quite telegraphed with how he's using his with his E backwards, the shifting sands. It feels like right now, Yukai's been really getting those chain trades down. It means that Ultra Prime haven't had to worry about the Nidalee, which is important. The Nidalee is quite hard to use. We do have second grub spawn. If Hack can get just one of these, and he does have the upgraded Q for if it's isolated, which it wouldn't be hit, but if you can get one of these with a smite, 4 grubs will be really important.
I'll also note, he just stole it away!
Steals 1, but he doesn't have smite for the second. Can Hacker stick around for a smite on the next one? Getting all 6 isn't the plan for Ultra Prime. Just getting 1 will be good enough for them, I think, but there's no smite on Tarzan. Breathe.
Got it.
Doesn't manage to ultimate out of the pit, so Hacker does get the one. You weren't expecting to get more than 1 or 2. Getting 1 and unlocking the might buff is important.
Also, really loved Hacker's positioning there. Fighting as Nidalee into grubs is really annoying because all those little mites block your spears. So if you're trying to block to hit the whole, hit Hacker in the back of the pit, it can be quite tricky.
I will also say it's annoying for. That's another chain again. Man, Yokai, such good chain hit rate. And good trading from that. I mean, it hasn't led to much in terms of the CS difference, but it just means that as Xiao who can't leave lane, which is kind of what you need right now. As we say, wait, when they group up, they're probably winning. Yokai, this is another rookie which has had a bit more of a patchy reception in LPL. He's had some awesome games. I feel like he's also been a player who's outplayed himself at points. And it feels like right now in this split, he needs to start, again, finding that consistency again, believe in himself alongside other rookies on his team, like the likes of Niket, to find himself a good result.
Doing that is going to be an important part of this game, of course. Weibo, if they can get towards those team fights, he said, should be fine, but, you know, calling out people like Yokai who have been doing their job this game, which is finding trades like this. Of course, Xiaohu is actually nominally head slightly inexperienced, like a 2 CS up, but that's kind of fine. First strike gold is wonderful.
First strike is a thing. So it does mean that gold, baby. So now the question is, how do Ultra Prime want to change beyond this? Niket's going forwards, doesn't catch Tarzan. Crisp has flash.
And Crisp has no spear and didn't get a chance to use the aftershock, so just dies to first blood to the Kha'Zix.
And once again, Niket, real core of how this team should be playing early. He's the only hard CC that's easy to land. Goes forward, gets an important kill, first kill on the board for Hacker. Hacker is ahead of Nidalee for now, and that can be important. The jungle matchup, as we said, with farming AP junglers in the meta, can get out of control very quickly. Currently, the individual gold leads on the bottom of the screen are all Ultra Prime favored. Need to see if that'll last. Again, as we said, really happens with Niket, knowing that his team's coming down and just finds a well-timed engage. Knows that there's a ward going to be placed down there, but chimes his approach really well with Hacker and Doggo. If he'd walked up a little earlier, maybe he would have got burst out. Shame he can't catch both Tarzan and Chris, but getting the 1 kill and stopping Chris from being around that bot side of the map does help.
And it does. Hacker getting early gold as well. It's really nice. He's got very cheap items as Kha'Zix. Umbral Glaive into Edge of Night, as I was kind of saying. He eclipse, that kind of thing. Feels really good. And with the free-ass boots as well, you don't even have to buy boots straight out. It's all turning up Hacker right.
We have Herald in a minute, Dragon spawning now. Yokai's going to recall and teleport back, but Xiao, who did get the push beforehand, Yokai has no mana, so he needs to go back for that bare minimum. Weibo, are you really going to get yourself to a point where you're not going to contest second dragon as well? I'm not sure I'm liking this whole seeding all objective style from Weibo. This is not looking great. They need to find themselves a big engage. Crisp does have flash, Niket doesn't. That might end up being the story of this fight. Yokai's teleported back now. I feel like that was their window, and now they might be in a bit of trouble.
Xiao down about half HP already can be a little bit rough, especially when you've got a Kha'Zix at level 9. You cannot walk up that easy as Xiao.
He's maxed his Q and evolved his Q, so very good neutral objective damage. Tarzan can get a spear, can look for that pounce in. It might have to be a flip, though.
For Niket, there's a teleport coming on in. Big damage onto Hacker, who does get a hold of the dragon, but dies for it. Tarzan now trying to get out the back of the pit. Doggo gets a big chunk, but nothing more as light. Is low, but not dead. Xingqian into the back line. Scary, Crisp, likely to be burned to his namesake. Goes down, 2 kills back. Flash for the upheaval. Light is going to be snuffed out. Another upheaval onto Xiaohu. And the Skada just comes in and brawls their way towards a victory for Ultra Prime.
Ultra Prime have had complete dominance over the early objectives, and a lot of that has been through their early lane dominance. This felt like the one time that might have fallen apart, and you know what? We've got sirens in the game for Weibo. We've got them outside in our own house as well.
Warning side.
The start of this was actually very good. They almost nuked the smite. Now he does end up securing the dragon. Really important. And Tarzan also dies on the back end. Yokai solos them out. So it's jungler for jungler, and it's basically a 3v3 on the bot side after this point, and you can just see that Weibo, they didn't have good setup for this. They were immediately on the retreat. They can't sit around battle lines with the Azir and the Ashe playing around range. They get blown up. They're behind in gold. They're behind objectives. Please tell me they can at least contest for the Herald. I don't know, man. I feel like Weibo giving up everything on the map is just really not what this comp wants. You can't give up too many objectives.
I have seen Nidalee just full clear her own jungle all game. They've not managed to find a combo with Tarzan yet at all, and Xiaohu has spent so much of the mid game. Chunk to half HP. They will come and contest this one.
Alright. Okay, I was wondering for a second whether anything more would happen around this. We get the Ezreal ult going up to chunk out people. They've left mid lane alone for now, and bot lane, which does mean that the 4 grubs, Ultra Prime will get some decent cross map. But Weibo do get themselves their first proper objectives. The 2 grubs were nice, but they weren't really that major. They get themselves that Herald. Maybe they can use that to finally force a grouped up fight in their advantage. We do lose a tower for now, though, so in terms of the immediate gold spent, it is fine for Weibo.
Ultra Prime now begin to play the map a little wider. Qingtian shoving up very deep, but they know they were on the Herald, and he's pretty hard to bring down at this point on the Skarner. Anyway, your ability to run away through walls is quite difficult to manage.
Damn, Scorpions are actually terrifyingly resilient, by the way. We talked about this on stream the other day.
Yeah.
Scorpions, they could, you things like, oh man, Scorpions, they're really hard to kill and radiation resistant stuff. They can breathe underwater. They can't breathe underwater, but they can hold their breath for 7 days. These creatures are not okay. They scare me a little bit, just a little bit. And Qingtian, while not of the biological variety, not even of the crystal variety anymore, which upsets me. Still very strong in this regard, and hasn't been put into a disadvantage by Breathe, which was really important in that first series.
Yeah, exactly. That Yukai gets another trade, but now that the Nash's is in, Xiaohu's ability to trade back a lot higher, especially with the Merc treads.
Oh my
as
god.
well.
Scorpions can breathe underwater.
Oh, no!
Everything's coming together. The signs are in the stars. It's on Summoner's Rift.
Qingtian.
That's the one. Yeah, I don't know how Qingtian works into that, but anyway, we'll workshop it. We'll workshop it. All the same, now Weibo are getting to the point where they have to defend in a 1-3-1. They do have a Nash's Tooth Azir in a side lane. Wave clears quickly, can hit towers very powerfully. But LeBlanc is a very strong side lane champion. And if you ever overpush, that's when Hacker can potentially come to play and make things nasty as well. We're looking to now see a vision control erupt into skirmishes. Niket has flashback up, and if he can catch someone, that can be very dangerous. Right there, you can just see Tarzan no flash, Niket has flash. You're like, maybe there's something to be found there.
Okay, so towards the top lane we go. LeBlanc begins to clear that wave briefly. Scuttle Crab contest again. Crisp is here, but Hacker has a Q and a smite, so pretty difficult to outsmite the Kha'Zix at the level 6 or the level 11 mark. Sorry.
Yeah, especially when you got the upgraded smite. What, your smite's going to be about 1,200.
It's 1,200 upgraded.
Also about, well, no, with the Q on top of it too.
Yeah, it's more like 1,600.
Folks, it's a lot, is what it is. And as you said, Hacker's going to get to the point where he gets the second item fairly soon as well. Cheap items. Really need to see Weibo get something out of this Herald. This is what they ended up getting as their first objective. Get a little bit of a chunk onto the mid lane turret. They're not going to be able to kill it. The chunk is nice, but they'll need to be able to return to that at some point. They also don't have themselves a lot of grubs to force big plays. Qingtian's come off of the side lane after pushing it. He's currently alone in a 1v2. Needs to be quite careful here.
He's relatively tanky. Could still be a threat here. He's gone very deep for this. There's an all-out now from the side of Breathe. Qingtian tunnels over a wall and says, "See ya, nerds."
See ya, Space Cowboy. I was like, wow, he's in a 1v2. He doesn't give a shit. Wow, he's just gone. Briefly finds himself in a 1v4, and Ultra Prime really starting to give some problems around the sidelines. The reason that play happens is because Qingtian pushes out bot lane, and as we see in the picture-in-picture, Yukai is starting to really control this matchup in the side lane too. Yes, you do have the Merc Treads, and you've got the Nash's Tooth for Azir. You are safe enough, but you're definitely not winning the side lane. What you're doing is you're holding it and farming it. That's good if you can stall to the point where you get some items for team fights, but if Yukai ever finds a kill onto you, then your side lane is effectively over beyond that point.
And of course, Yukai realized, my chunks aren't doing that much. I'm going to buy a Blighting Jewel, and does just that. Suddenly, that meager magic resistant Merc Treads just isn't enough anymore.
See that? Yeah, now Weibo. I think they've realized they need to start supporting the strong side of the map a little more. They've given up another dragon. This is a huge problem for Weibo now. Like, a huge problem. Because what normally happens, just to paint the picture of modern League of Legends, is that in the current patch, if you give up early dragons, you can at least contest for later ones if you use gold at this time, right? So if you end up taking 2 early dragons, later on, you can give up dragons and just take side lane turrets instead. Ultra Prime now have the choice of Soul or killing side lanes the next time the dragon spawns. Weibo don't have that choice. Ultra Prime get to decide what happens next at the objective. Asher is not going to hit. It's a little way off. Yukai is getting chunked though. Might have to teleport back to this turret.
In the second Asher, I feel like I've seen this game. Not really had a particularly proactive game in general of Weibo, but pretty notoriously bad when you're running things like an Ashe and a Nautilus.
Yeah, and Doggo says, you don't have arrow. I can jump forwards. That's nice. Doggo on the Ezreal just being a bit of a wave clear bot. Did have one other Ezreal game so far, and I wasn't that impressed. Had an awkward game. Now we see a bit of a fight in the topside river. Crisp is isolated. That kind of sucks.
I remember he's got opportunity. Nothing like the shield from that Edge of Night, that bit more damage available. Breathe coming from the back end of his Xiao, not quite down to the Sigil Mountain. Breathe is here, but I'm not sure there's much breath to be given. His last one, swiftly extinguished by Hacker.
Oh, and it's just as the Baron spawns as well.
Oh,
Tarzan, luckily he's alive. Now, we might see Weibo force mid lane turret, but when you have the isolated Kha'Zix damage onto the Baron, that's going to be powerful. Yukai might try and assassinate Light on the back end of this too.
Isn't he?
No, he's not going to be there in time. Yukai just holding the fort, and it's going to be mid lane turret down for Ultra Prime, but they take the Baron. Fantastic set of plays and skirmishes from them.
And this is with an Ezreal who's not notoriously the fastest Baron taker. Instead, you get a Kha'Zix with 2 items and suddenly it disappears. Have a look at the replay, because Chris just isolated.
Yeah, and it just feels like Weibo have not found a way to successfully group up. The Nautilus gets nothing done in this fight, doesn't even get the ultimate off. At the end of it, dies before it can get past. And I really want to praise, again, Hacker and Yukai comboing up with also Niket as well, managing to be an assassination on the same page. I think that Niket has been so good for this team at just joining the fights at the right point. Very consistent engage, getting the damage in the right place. With the 1-3-1 and the Baron, they're going to get a load of turrets. And Ultra Prime, they might have just seen themselves through at this point to a game 1 victory. It's not over, but this should be a huge game momentum switch for them.
It's massive, and reminder, when we came into this game, we said, look, I think Ultra Prime's comp's harder to play, harder to execute. It's going to require them to play individually very well, and they've done that. On the other side, Weibo have kind of just not done anything.
It's like, oh yes, to have the easier comp to play, you must first play. You must first actually be participating in the game. Do you see that Xiao, who got an objective bounty off of the bot lane out of turret, but Ultra Prime took inner turret there in the mid lane, which is important for them, and they still have themselves 2 minutes of Baron buff left with a 1-3-1 composition. That's going to get them to the point where they can push in lanes, reset, go towards that last dragon as well, which could potentially be the soul point. Maybe we see Weibo fight finally around that soul. We'll see whether they can actually team fight beyond that point. Maybe look for a bit of a... They have the damage now as well, actually, to maybe pick off someone like Yukai. The thing about LeBlanc is that you never really get tankier. If you get one miracle pick now, you can still get yourself into a good position, but it's just really hard when you're this far behind.
I'm also looking at Cloud Soul on Skarner, on Kha'Zix, on Rel. Giving these guys more move speed? Yeah, that sounds like a great thing to have to deal with.
And now we get ourselves into a position where Ultra Prime are actually grouping up themselves. Weibo. What can they do? Can they find themselves an Ashe Arrow? Can they find themselves Hex Flash or Flash 4? The Ashe Arrow misses, and the answer to that one is no.
And away we go towards the bot lane tier 2. Weibo Gaming not doing a lot of gaming right now. They seem to be doing a lot of waiting, and it's been, I think, a bit of a mistake as Yukai in the picture-in-picture. Currently playing the one part of the 1-4. Down to half HP is this tier 2. We get a knockback on Qingqian, but at this point the Skarner is so unbearably tanky. Fimbulwinter completed as well for additional shields and heals.
And by the way, he's going to get himself a Jack Show pretty soon as well. And in the first... Look, folks, first time we saw Qingqian play for this roster was against Weibo, and he got demolished by Breathe. Breathe massacred him in the Rumble versus Darius. He's done a great job. He has been the unsung hero. Doggo's out of position, has Flash, has Barrier, and an E. He's very much out of dodge. And that one attempt again, they use the Ashe Arrow, use the Nautilus, and they can't find anything, and they're falling apart in the 1-3-1.
He has a Flash, has an E, and gets to buffer his way through the depth charge with an R as well. Crisp, continue to look, can't find it. The damage back at this point from an Ezreal at 2 items is pretty foul. And now Yukai on the flank looking for an ethereal chains onto Tarzan.
That's the first time I've ever seen like an inhibitor be taken behind a tower, because the Azir tower goes down and Yukai's like, okay. Doesn't stop the inhibitor going down. Dragon's now up, Ashe Arrow is available, but there's no flash or engage from Nautilus. Yukai has been caught though, has the flash.
Wait, Xiao looking for an angle, doesn't really land it, gets it onto the Skarner. Yukai taken low but not down, can teleport back in. Niket with a monster Madness Storm gets 5, and they're all going into a mass grave. Ultra Prime, go plus Ultra. Invert the name, game 1 victory. Damn the odds, they are the better team in game 1.
Oh my word, Niket solidifying again his claim on the fact that he is just one of the best rookie supports we've seen in a while. Niket, fantastic engage, dies on the Nexus turret, but his job was done. Weibo, they didn't contest, they didn't fight, they fall by the wayside.
They finally take a moment to find and engage, and it is too little, it is too late, and Niket, again, this guy on Rel is so good.
His Ral, his Alistair, his Nautilus, again, I think this was a team effort. This was a hard composition to play from the side of Ultra Prime. This was not an easy composition. And somehow they make it work. I think a lot of that was helped by the fact that Weibo didn't contest early. Look, folks, half of this game was on the fact that Weibo didn't play